Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how I use this single scrap 1x4 measuring about 20 inches and how I turned it into this beautiful Christian themed napkin holder. Now if you want to see how I did it, stick around and let's go. Now to get started, I went ahead and took the board and measured a tick mark at 8 inches, used my square and drew a line all the way down. Then I went to the miter saw and pretty much just made the first cut. Then I went back and measured 12 inches, making another tick mark, measuring a line all the way down across again, and went back to the miter saw, made the second cut, leaving me with two boards, one at 12 inches and the other at 8 inches. Grabbed the 12-inch board and went over to the table saw. Then I used my tape measure to measure out 1¼ inches from the fence to the blade. Took the 12-inch board and ripped my first 1¼ inch piece. Then took the offcut and then went ahead and ripped the second 1¼ inch piece, leaving me two identical 12-inch pieces, both at 1¼ inches. Went back to the miter saw and adjusted it from 0 degrees all the way to 60 degrees. Then I stacked the two pieces from the previous step together on the miter saw and made the 60-degree miter cut. Took one of the pieces that we just made 60-degree miter cuts on, measured 7 inches from the long edge, added a tick mark, made a line along the tick mark with my square, stacked the marked piece on top of the other piece, then went over to the miter saw to make the cut. Making sure the two pieces were properly aligned and square with the fence, I went ahead and made the cut, leaving me 4 pieces, 2 pieces at 7 inches with the 60-degree miter cuts, and 2 pieces we would use in the next step. Went over to my Rockler cross-cut sled and set it at 30 degrees. I clamped the first of the 2 pieces, and then I started to make the 30-degree cut. Then I immediately realized that my blade wasn't high enough to cover the full thickness of the piece. Stopped the blade, then I went ahead and used my other offcut that I'll be cutting next to raise the blade just high enough to where it will be passing the thickness. Then tried again and finished off the cut. Repeated the same step for the second piece, and now I had 2 identical pieces with both 30-degree miters. Then it was back to the 2 pieces with the 60-degree miters, where I measured from the square side 1¼ inch, made tick marks on the 1¼ inch and also at 2½ inches, and I did this for both of them. It's important to note that when making these tick marks that the 2 pieces be mirroring each other or facing in opposite directions. This will be important later. I used my square to then make straight lines on both of those tick marks on each of those pieces. Again, notice how the lines were drawn on opposing sides on each of these pieces where they are mirroring each other. I clamped the first piece to the Rockler crosscut sled, and I made some additional lines extending over the edges so it's easier to see where we're going to make the next cut. The pieces making up the crosses will be joined together using half-lap joints. So we'll be making cuts halfway through the thickness of this piece from one line to the other line, which is about 3/8 of an inch. Got started on the first one, nudging it about the thickness of the blade through each pass. Once it was done, I went ahead and I unclamped it, and it was looking pretty good, so I went ahead and repeated the same process for the second one. With both of them done, this is exactly how they both should look like. Next step was to take one of the pieces that we just cut a slot through and lay it flat on the surface along the 60-degree miter edge. Then take one of the smaller pieces with the 30-degree miter and place it in the slot, making sure that that's flat on the same surface. Then make 2 lines as I'm doing right here. Then simply repeat the same process for the other 2 pieces. You should end up with 2 pieces that look just like this, mirroring each other. I also shaded the areas we'll be cutting. Then went back to the crosscut sled on the table saw and repeated the same process we did for the previous 2 pieces, where we cut into half the thickness from one side of the line to the other side within the shaded areas. Then repeated the same process for the second piece. And the two pieces are done. With all the pieces cut, I went ahead and did a quick test fit by placing the base of the napkin holder on a flat surface and then continued to place the crosses in position on top of the base. And so far so good. It's starting to look exactly the way I thought it would look like. But we all know that the real fun doesn't begin until the sanding begins. And that's what I'm doing here. I've sanded all the pieces with 80, 120, and 220 grit sandpaper. And I won't bore with you with the rest, so let's get past all this. Now back to something a lot more interesting than sanding. I decided to add 45-degree chamfers along the top edges of the base to add a little bit of style and character. Then it was glue up time. I started with the crosses. Glued up the first two pieces for the first cross, set it on the base to make sure that it still sits flat, clamped it at the joint, and set it aside to dry. Repeated the same process for the second cross, and waited until they were both dry. Came back a couple hours later and unclamped them, then it was on to the next step. Though it wasn't completely necessary, I did come back and fill in the gaps between the joints with wood filler for a cleaner look, but again, not necessary. I think it would look great even without it. And it did add some extra time for sanding, which I wasn't thrilled about. Now the next step was assembling the crosses onto the base. I placed the front edge against another sturdy edge so it wouldn't move. Then I used a spacer that was just the right thickness and I placed it on the front edge. This would then allow me to accurately align both crosses so that they line up both in the front and the back. Satisfied with the positioning, it was now time to glue the crosses onto the base. Dabbed a little bit of CA glue on the base of where the first cross would be glued onto. Then put some glue on the edges of the cross where it would be glued onto the base. Then sprayed some accelerator onto the actual edges with the glue. Then took the cross and placed it on top of the base and held it there for a few seconds while the accelerator and the CA glue have a chemical reaction, giving it a great strong bond while allowing the glue to dry. This essentially allows us to just continue working without having to waste any more time waiting for things to dry. And with that, I repeated the same steps for the second cross. Again, held it for a few seconds and then just cleaned out any glue squeeze out that I could find. It was looking good, but we still needed to add a little bit of strength. So I decided to lay it on its side, grabbed my brad nailer, and put some brad nails on each of the 4 glue joints from the bottom. And just like that, we were ready for the finish. But since I'm working with softwood here, I wanted to go ahead and apply some pre-stain on it so that way it would take on the stain that we would eventually put on it much better. After applying the pre-stain, I wiped down any excess and waited about 45 minutes until I would start the next step. Now when it was time to stain, I went ahead with a black stain. And the reason for this was I felt it would exemplify the meaning of what this whole thing is about, and which is about the death of Christ. And I felt that black would be fitting to represent that. And I also thought that since it was going to be black, that it would also contrast well with some white napkins. So here you go. And of course, more importantly, white would also exemplify the resurrection of Christ. So everything just seems to fit well together. After applying the stain, I waited about 2 or 3 days for it to cure before the next step, which was also the last and final step. I had some spray lacquer, which was very glossy and works really well for small projects. So I ended up using 2 or 3 coats of that, and which was great because you could really just spray on one coat, wait about 5 minutes, spray on another coat without having to wait too long. That's it, it's done. Here's the grand reveal. Hey, since you made it this far, would you consider subscribing? It really helps the channel out. And so you don't miss any future videos that we put out. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and drop a comment down and say hi. See you on the next one.